Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar, Job Search Strategies, Social Science Careers in Food and Agriculture. Just one housekeeping item, please keep yourself muted if you're not speaking. Also, if you have questions, please put them in the chat box. My name is Dr. Anna Erwin. I'm a postdoctoral research associate in the Department of Forestry and Natural Resources, and I'm organizing this webinar on behalf of the Grad Student Emerging Scholar Committee as part of the Agriculture, Food, and Human Value Society. This year, we surveyed members of our Grad Student Emerging Scholar listserv to identify their interests and priorities for upcoming programs. Job preparation for academic and non-academic positions was their most popular interest. Therefore, we created this webinar to address the responses to the survey. More broadly speaking, we hope that this webinar demystifies processes for applying to academic and non-academic positions as a social scientist with expertise in agriculture and food systems. We are very lucky to have 4 panelists here today who are social scientists from academic and non-academic backgrounds, who hold academic and non-academic positions. These include Katie Dentzmen, who is a social science program specialist with the USDA NIFA. Vanessa García Polanco, who is a federal policy associate with the National Young Farmers Coalition. Jason Konefal, who's chair and associate professor in the Department of Sociology at Sam Houston State University. And then, like I said, myself, Dr. Anna Erwin. I'm a postdoctoral research associate at Purdue University. Thank you all so much for agreeing to speak about your experience today. Today, folks will present it for about 10 minutes. We will then have a chance to ask each panelist 1 or 2 questions, and then we will open up to all panels at the end for questions. Before we start, I want to bring your attention to our upcoming conference. It's called Just Food because it's never just food. This conference is being held in coordination with the Association for the Study of Food and Society, the Canadian Association for Food Studies, and the Society for the Anthropology of Food and Nutrition. It will be held by the Culinary Institute of America and New York University. It will be from June 9th to the 15th, and it will be held virtually. Also, if you're interested in joining Ag and Food and Human Values, please email me at erwin9@purdue.edu or info@afhvs.org. Thank you, and now I'm going to turn the floor over to Dr. Katie Dentzmen.
Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for the good turnout. I'm really excited that people are interested in this topic. Just a quick reminder, if you just recently got on, to turn off your microphone or to mute yourself so that we don't get too many interruptions. So I'm just going to give a brief background on myself and kind of how I got to USDA NIFA, why I chose to go that way, what some of the process was like for applying, and what working there is like. So I am a sociologist. I got my bachelor's degree as a double major in environmental science and sociology, and then got my PhD in sociology at Michigan State University. And I specialize in agriculture and environment. And while I was there, I did a research project looking at herbicide-resistant weeds and farmer adoption of various management techniques, which was a lot of fun. Then got hired as a postdoc to look at biodegradable mulch adoption at Washington State University. Moved out to northern Idaho, which is a really great place to be at the moment, really beautiful. And then I also got a postdoc at University of Idaho looking at women farmers and kind of some intersections there with sexuality, gender, and ethnicity, and how that creates certain barriers for them entering farming using various farming practices. So I have a ton of research experience, and I was a postdoc for about 4 years. And that's part of what drove me to pursue a path with NIFA. And to be honest, I really never saw myself going into government work. My goal was always to stay in academia and to become a professor. But after 4 years of being a postdoc, that got pretty tiring. And I'm sure many of you can relate to that, where just being on that soft money year after year after year was extremely stressful. I didn't feel like I was getting to kind of follow my own thing. And then the pandemic hit and actually tanked a potential job offer that I had. And I was like, you know what, maybe it's time for a switch up. Maybe it's time to start trying something else. And I had an office mate who applied to USDA ERS and got the position. And I was like, you know what? Maybe something like that would be a good route for me. And so I applied to the social science program specialist position with USDA NIFA. And so NIFA is the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, and they're the granting agency for the USDA. So they deal with all of the funding aspects. So if you're working on like an AFRI grant or something, NIFA is the one who controls all of that. And to be honest, I was pretty surprised when I got an interview, and even more surprised when they actually offered me the job. And it took a lot of really deep thought and kind of soul searching before I ended up accepting it, because I had been so set on this one path of, I do well in graduate school, I get a postdoc, I publish a bunch, and I get, a tenure track position, and that's the only option for me. And so I definitely had to go through a lot of like emotions to kind of set that aside and say that, maybe there's a different way for me to be happy, to be successful, to feel like I'm contributing to something. And then I also talked to a bunch of people in terms of, would this kind of like shut me off from an academic career permanently if I took this job? And their response was mostly, in the short term, no. Because if you're still publishing, you still have some articles coming out, that kind of stuff, it's not going to hurt you. And that's certainly what I've seen, because I've applied to a couple little jobs, so basically before I even got to NIFA. And they've been really interested in the fact that I work at NIFA. They're like, the grant system, that's fantastic. So that's actually been a bit of a benefit. But I ended up taking the position, and I love it. And that's partly to my own surprise. I thought I was a little concerned when I took this position, because I had been so into doing research as opposed to like supporting research at a higher level. But frankly, I am so happy that I took this position. I love working for NIFA. I don't know if I would even go back to academia if I had the chance, maybe, but it's great. And part of that is just because I get to be involved in so many different aspects that I didn't know I would get to be involved in. So the program specialist role at NIFA mainly works with administrative things. So like taking grants off of grants.gov and bringing them to the organization, organizing review panels for grants, working with national program leaders to kind of figure out who the reviewers are, to actually hold review panels for grants, to manage the awards and get people to submit all their materials so we can give them money. And that's actually more fun than I thought it would be too. But what I also get to do, which I didn't realize I would get to do, is be involved in these larger teams at NIFA. There's a lot of flexibility to do what you want to do. And so I'm the executive secretary for the climate change core team at NIFA, which is part of a larger USDA-wide effort, which is part of a larger governmental administration effort, since the new administration is so interested in climate change. So I get to be a part of making requests for proposals for climate change oriented projects, which is really exciting and I think really important. And so like I make some of the lines that appear in the RFA to request specific proposals and get to have that kind of impact, which is so fun. And I get to work on what other teams? So nutrition and food security is a team that I'm part of. I'm involved in writing a farm bill report for Congress on some of our programs and funding, which is a lot of fun. And couple other things. I also applied to be the LGBT special program emphasis manager. So we have some special emphasis programs that focus on underserved groups. So there's one for women, one for veterans, one for people with disabilities, LGBT issues, which is the one that I'm running for, and then a couple for different minority racial groups as well. And those are some really cool stuff that we have going on too. So it's a lot of working in teams, which is a bit different from research I've done in the past where it was very individual. I really enjoy working with all of these people. It's a smart, great group of people. And yeah, I can't say enough how much I've enjoyed the switch over from academia to government. So as far as the process for looking for and obtaining the position, really, you just kind of go on USA Jobs and do some searching. And if you just Google like USDA careers, they take you to a USDA careers page, and there's stuff for students and graduates. We have student fellowships and higher student fellows as well. And then there's also just a big search engine that you can put like, I want social science related positions, and I want to be in Kansas City or or DC or wherever it is. And it'll pop down a whole list of everything. And you click on it and you apply on USDAjobs.com. And so it's pretty straightforward. Certainly easier than applying for an academic job. You're not writing a cover letter, you're not writing a research statement, this kind of thing. You're really just submitting your resume and a bit of job description. And so one key there that I learned through this process is there's an option on USA Jobs to like automatically fill your resume. You just like upload the document and it fills it right in. Do not do that. It can mess up some stuff. And one of my friend who got the job at ERS did that first and then found out that she had been rejected before they even looked at her application because it said she wasn't qualified. And she was like, what? I know I'm qualified, because she knew someone in ERS and he had encouraged her to apply. So she reached out and was like, what's going on with this? And he was like, did you just automatically fill your resume? She's like, yeah. It's like, don't do that. So he helped her get through that. But you should really just like go in and type in all of your information. That's the way to guarantee that it's getting in there correctly. And so that's what I did. And just for my job experience, that's where I put a little more wordiness of how that applied to the current position. And it's a little more like getting a regular office job. My interview, they asked me questions like, explain a conflict you've had at work and how you resolved it. What are your organizational skills? The kinds of things that I haven't really gotten as much in academic jobs, where they're more like, what is your research exactly? And there were those questions too, but it's a little more like an office job in those ways. Let me see, recommendations for people who want to apply and obtain a position in this sector. I mean, just go for it. If there's something that you think you might be a good fit for, throw in your application. It's pretty easy to do, and it's a great position if you can get it. And the other thing that I would say is certainly feel free to reach out to people in that position, or who would be on like a hiring committee, something like that. Everyone that I've talked to at USDA NIFA has been very willing to talk to me about the position, very flexible. The division director that I work with has been fantastic about answering my questions when I was thinking about taking this position, discussing the flexibility that I would have in continuing to publish, for instance. I got 5% of my time to finish up current grant projects as I shifted into this new position, which was really helpful because I didn't just want to leave them hanging. So definitely feel free to reach out to people that exist in that world.
I think we can go on to maybe one question now. Katie, I hate to cut you off.
Of course. Sorry, no problem.
If anybody has a question, maybe you can put it in the chat box really fast for Katie.
Yeah, somebody just sent me a direct one.
Okay, perfect.
Saying, does it matter if somebody is ABD versus PhD in hand? Does that influence the type of role available? I would say no. If you're ABD, still go for it. The program specialist role actually does not require a PhD. We have people with bachelors, we have people with masters, we have people with PhDs, and you just kind of make the position what you want in a way. There's definitely flexibility there based on your expertise and your experience. So for that role, they're looking for all levels. But as far as ABD versus PhD, as long as you have your PhD by like when you would start the position, and again, that was flexible for me too. They allowed me to delay the position for a little bit, so that was great. And one more question, and then I'll hand it off to the next person. What have you not liked about working for NIFA, or what has been disappointing? I've really liked a lot of it. It's kind of hard to come up with something because I didn't have huge expectations, and I was so pleasantly surprised by how much I like it. One frustrating thing I would say is the bureaucracy, is the government. So they offered me the position in, I think, like October, and I didn't start until February because of just like the slowness of the entire process. And that's been true throughout like the training. And I think it's partly because the USDA just moved from DC to Kansas City and lost 75% of their employees. So everything's really chaotic right now. And that means that like training I had to just look up on my own, and I'm like, oh look, there's some random training videos that are uploaded, and a bunch of people didn't know about it. So things are just like a little chaotic and messy right now. My understanding is that's not normally the case, but those things have been a little frustrating. I'll hand it off to the next person.
Great. Vanessa, you can go ahead. I think you can share, Vanessa. Let me know if you have an issue, or if you need to share. If you'd like to share, let me know.
Okay, sounds good. Hello, everyone. My name is Vanessa García Polanco. I'm currently the Federal Policy Interim Director. Actually, I just got a promotion this week at National Young Farmers Coalition. So my background is, first and foremost, I'm an immigrant. I've been in this country for 10 years. And when I arrived here, I was really interested in environmental and agriculture, and that led me to the University of Rhode Island, where I did my undergrad in environmental and natural resource economics with a concentration in hunger studies and sustainable agriculture. And while I was there, I got to work for a URI cooperative extension for 4 years. That actually gets a lot of money from NIFA, and that was actually when I started seeing a lot of those interconnections, so like federal government funding local resources and being really interested about how we use science and research to advance sustainable agriculture and also racial equity. At the same time, during those 4 years, I did internships at the Department of Interior and at the Department of Agriculture, and I was really involved in state and local agricultural policy in Rhode Island. After graduation, I did my master's at Michigan State University, where I did a more focused in sustainable agriculture and community resources, doing my thesis on how immigrants, refugees engage in local urban agriculture and how it relates to resilience and local food systems. And it was, I joined the coalition a year ago. So it was like the second week of the pandemic when I got my job offer, and I had applied a few months early before the pandemic. And through that process, I applied to a lot of jobs in DC, in Michigan, and also in New England. And actually it was really interesting going through that process because I had a really balanced background with research. I had a balanced background with policy and a lot of community outreach and organizing. And it happened that a lot of the jobs that I applied in Michigan with like research and advocacy and policy told me I was underqualified. But when I applied for those jobs in DC, people told me I was overqualified because they counted my research experience as policy, because a lot of my research always related to policy and like how this funding is being used at the local level. So that was like an interesting thing to navigate, definitely. So when I joined the coalition, I was actually finishing my master's. It was again like the second week of the pandemic. So I started part-time until I submitted my thesis, and then went full-time with the coalition. In the coalition, what is really exciting is that we have offices in DC, but also nationwide, because we serve young farmers and farmers of color nationwide. We have a service team, a policy team, and a grassroots team. So any of those roles in the organization were having a good fit for me, but I was more interested in moving towards policy because I have always navigated that intersection of like bringing science and research to policy spaces and also community voices that many other times, especially in the past 4 years, were missing, especially in the federal level. So for me, this job was a really good fit, especially right now because I'm trying to transition from maybe having wanting an academic career, never really thought of staying in academia, but I was really fascinated by things like jobs like cooperative extension and like research centers in academia. Like I got to work at the Michigan State University Center for Regional Food Systems, and I was always looking for jobs like that, like cooperative extension, MSU, like program extension specialist, maybe Johns Hopkins, programs that still had a connection to academia, but were more community or policy oriented. So when I made that, right now I'm still making that transition. So something that has been really helpful to me is to set boundaries. Like, yes, I'm still a member of this academic society. I still go to academic conferences, but I don't want to publish anymore. Because for the job that I want to be doing, you need policy memos, not like 20, 30 pages policy academic papers in general. So for me, I have been trying to make that transition, but I'm still bringing my identity and the things that I care about, like science policy, science communication, to this role. And it's something that I still get to do every day. So a lot of things that I do every day are communications, coalition building, having a lot of large team meetings with different stakeholders and different organizations in the landscape, so we can identify policy priorities and do targeted advocacy and lobbying to certain institutions, groups, and Congress people and staffers. It's also taking a lot of meetings with organizations like NIFA, and also participating in a lot of transparency and review processes for the Department of Agriculture. So Katie was mentioning putting together review panels. I serve on those review panels. is also like serving in advisory groups a lot, about advising USDA or its department on how they should be implementing programs. And I think that was like the best thing that could have happened to me during the pandemic, because I feel like a lot of us were having a lot of anxiety about what we should be doing during the pandemic. And my job was like so impactful on helping farmers during the pandemic that actually really helped me, you know, manage the anxiety that we're all still having living in this world that we're living right now. So that was really, really good use of my time and resources to make that switch. Like, this is what I'm good at. This is what I can be doing right now to help farmers. And this is what my job is. So that was really good. Applying for other jobs, I think there were things about applying for the job that I didn't know until after I got a job 6 months later. And this was really funny. I applied for jobs in DC and I never heard back from certain people, but I heard back from the place I was hired. And 6 months later, I was told they literally negotiated who will take me, because they both wanted me, and they literally had like a back channeling conversation on who will move forward, and was decided that my employer will be the one like, well, like, okay, but you can have Vanessa. But because they work so closely together, I still work with their staff every day of the week. I still work with the person that got the job I applied there. But it was like so weird. Like, they never told me that when I was applying. I was like, I'm not good enough. They didn't like me, but now we got to work together. And like 6 months later, they were like, actually, this is what happened. So that happened too. And I think my advice for everyone is also utilizing your networks. A lot of these organizations, especially in advocacy and at the national level, they'll talk to each other. They are in coalition with each other. So when you apply for this job, definitely tell people you're applying so they can be advocates for you, or they can be making the phone calls to even other references, being telling, yes, this person is a good fit for your organization, or please keep an eye on this person's application. Because I didn't do that until the end, when I was casually talking to a friend, being like, hey, I applied to your National Young Farmers, so maybe we'll get to work together again. She goes like, oh my God, let me call them right ahead. It's like, it's okay, you don't have to do that. And I was like, no, it's okay, I insist. So I think that's really nice that people always advocating for you, even when you forget to advocate for yourself, because you may not feel as confident. And I think right now I just want to really stress that the importance of like knowing your worth and setting boundaries. Obviously, because this job offer came in the middle of the pandemic, I felt a little push that I had to take it, because who knew there would be any job offers? Everything there was a lot of uncertainty in those few weeks. So I literally was just like, it's okay, I can start next week, even if it's still writing my thesis, and I will jump into it. So looking back, I really regret not being like, no, I was starting 4 months, or like having a more stronger boundary so I could make that transition better. And right now, I think being in this role is still setting those boundaries. Like, these are the things I want to be doing, because this is the career I want to have. I want to be a policy person that still cares about science policy and agricultural policy and agricultural research, but in the policy space. So actually setting boundaries like, no, I'm not going to do those things anymore. And my advice for everyone is telling people the jobs you're applying for, utilizing listservs. I love listservs. We have academic societies and institutional listservs. I don't get access to those anymore after I graduated. I miss them. So definitely utilizing listservs, job boards, and the people in your network to get the jobs you want.
Great. Thank you so much, Vanessa. Does anybody have any questions directly for Vanessa? Here's a couple. Here's one, Vanessa. If you want to read it, I think it's Rachel Ortinga.
Yes. If we were preparing to work in nonprofit, civil society, or government after our PhDs, what are additional experiences or skills or certificates we could be building, and the type of publication record we should shoot for? I think for me, what was helpful, I had policy briefs and policy journals. And that's exactly what I do right now every day. Still, like, I need to be submitting kind of like policy briefs to the Department of Agriculture or to other departments. So that kind of publication record that you just don't publish 30-page, 70-page academic papers, but you can do a 5-page one. They have to be really concise. It's something really good. And a skills experience, intern in federal agencies, intern in government offices, intern for your elected members, for Congress, for anything that will actually give you like that practical experience, like actually working in government or policy and politics. It will be the best bet, because that's not a certificate you can have. That's just experience. And yes, the Science Policy Journal is actually a really good example of that competition. I did it last year, and that's one of the publications I have.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And we'll have more time for more questions at the end. So I we're going to switch gears now. Thank you so much, Vanessa. So we started with non-academic, and I'm going to go into academic now. I do have a presentation because I rely on that. So hold on one second while I get that up here. So I'm going to try really hard. I'm going to speak quickly so that we can get through this. Let me see here. So mine is on postdoctoral and visiting assistant professor perspectives. Again, my name is Erwin. I'm going to go quickly. I'm going to do an outline, introduce myself, go through quickly the process of obtaining a position as a visiting assistant professor, speak on the process of obtaining a position as a postdoc, some recommendations and some reflections I have as well after doing this for about 4 years. So my name is Dr. Anna Erwin. I have a PhD in Planning, Governance, and Globalization from Virginia Tech and from the School of Public International Affairs. I'm an interdisciplinary social scientist. My work sits at the nexus of human geography, public policy, and rural sociology. So I'm trained in mostly qualitative methods, but I also have mixed methods experience, and I study climate change as well as agricultural change, more broadly speaking. So in the past, I held a visiting assistant professor position and a postdoctoral research position, which I am right now. So on the one hand, I want to say being a white lady in academia from a middle-class family, some things like making a social network have come quite easily to me. However, I would say other things like figuring out the processes for applying to jobs and understanding all these different types of processes, more broadly speaking, have been quite challenging. And so as part of the goal for this, for my presentation, I think this whole webinar is just to make things more accessible to others so people are not so confused, and so we can really open up academia to more people. So I feel like a lot of the processes are quite mystified, and hopefully we can demystify a little bit by this presentation. So let me see here. Okay, so real fast, a visiting assistant professor position. I held one of these at Miami University of Ohio. These are short-term positions where you have a higher teaching load, often with 3 or 4 classes a semester. You often have different preps. For example, I had a VAP position where I taught 3 classes a semester, with a total of 5 preps per year. Like Vanessa said, these are often listed on listservs and websites. I also find that there's less in ag schools, especially at larger R1s. These will often be in sociology departments, political science departments, humanities departments, and others. They're also quite popular in liberal arts schools. And universities often post these in the spring. A couple things, materials are often similar to those of a tenure track position, including cover letter, diversity statement. Sometimes there are less, but I'm seeing there's a trend to have more and more documents for these positions. Like any position, you need to have your reference letters and referees in hand if you're going to apply for these. So they're commonly short term. Some will include the details of that in the job description, like 1 year or 1 year with possible opportunity to prolong. So in the position I was in, there were opportunities to prolong, but I did not know until March or April of that year. So there's quite a lot of uncertainty at the end. And rarely there are opportunities to turn these into tenure track. But many people I know, including myself, they had that option, but I was not chosen for the position. So it can be kind of a difficult thing to navigate. So I would not expect that ever. So I find that these positions are great for preparing for tenure track, non-tenure track teaching positions, academic positions. They can give you the space to publish more, but you have to balance the teaching load with publishing. There's also postdocs. There's grant-funded postdocs, which are funded by a mentor. There's grant-funded postdocs, which are funded by you. And I'm also seeing this sort of visiting assistant professor / postdoc mix, which is when you have a lower teaching load, higher research time. I'm also seeing more positions in places like Succinct that are great for agricultural social scientists, as well as in places like Columbia, Yale, Dartmouth, and Brown, which have institutional support for postdoc positions. The timing is all year long. They come and go all year long. They're advertised on listservs. You can also look directly into grants.gov, USDA, NIFA, NIH, Ford Foundation. Our graduate school at Purdue, where I work right now, advertises postdocs, but I would caution folks who work in large land grants, because a lot of those positions are really going to be not for social scientists. I found that at Virginia Tech as well as at Purdue. So that's just something to be aware of. These are also short-term positions like Katie mentioned. So you're going to be, there's often a time limit in the announcement. While some can turn into longer-term positions, I would not expect it. They offer intensive research training, which is awesome. So I decided to do a postdoc because I wanted more training in mixed methods. I've learned so much, almost as much, if not more, than I learned in my PhD. These skills are super useful for tenure track positions, but also for administrative positions in federal agencies, nonprofit. So it's I'd say it's a little bit broader in your training as a postdoc, especially with social science skills. Some useful resources for applying. So always ask your mentors, and mentors, especially for postdocs, are integral. So you always contact the mentor ahead of time before applying. And if you are applying to a NIFA, USDA, NIH, you have to have a mentor who will work with you in order to do that postdoc. Ask your friends and colleagues for all of their materials. Maybe use a professor as in. Some people use that. There's also Aurora PhD, which Purdue has a free subscription to, which basically offers training videos on how to organize and sell your skills for either an academic or non-academic position. Like I said, there's a university graduate school office, and some people use job coaches. If that's something that you're interested in, it's very expensive, and so I just make sure you find the right one. And then finally, some reflections I have. The two positions I had, they're both short-term, like I said. They were very good learning experiences. But like I said, like Katie said, they're very tough because of the short-term nature. They also could be tough financially because you really can't, you have a hard time moving up and making more money. So things like retirement, these things that are really important for your life, it can be very troubling and very difficult financially. It can also be difficult for family, partners, those sorts of things. So I just suggest having your limits, like Katie and Vanessa both sort of mentioned, having your time limits, how long you'll be able to do these. And my other big recommendation is that to really be flexible and keep your options open. So if your goal is to get a tenure track job, that's great, but I would not put all my eggs in that basket ever, because there's way too little tenure track jobs for the amount of postdocs, PhDs there are out there. And so while you're in these positions, really try to work on how to hone your skills and define your skills and how they can apply elsewhere outside of academia. So I cannot stress that enough. So anyways, there's me. If I have time for maybe one question. Let me see. So here's one here. So Chris asked if there's examples of websites and listservs that advertise academic jobs, and how do we find them? So in regard to academic jobs, there's higher ed, there's a lot of them. So I even look on Indeed a lot, actually, if you just look up environmental policy positions or whatever you're looking for, agricultural social scientists, natural resource social scientists. There's higher ed, I think it's called higheredjobs.com. There's the Chronicle of Higher Education. There's Inside Higher Ed. There is a few more like that. And listservs, you can get on our listserv. It would be great. We send jobs around. There's also let me think. Depending on what your discipline is, there's likely disciplinary listservs as well. So if you're sociology, to get on the sociology listserv. If you're a geographer, if you're interdisciplinary like me, getting on multiple ones helps a lot. So, and that's also something we could probably open up at the end as well to everybody else who has more suggestions for that. So with that said, I think I'm going to change gears, and Jason, and again, we're going to open up questions to everyone at the very end. So thanks, folks.
Perfect. I can jump in now. I'm Jason Konefal. I'm an associate professor and chair of the sociology department at Sam Houston State University. We're a comprehensive regional university of about 21,000 students, increasingly diverse student body, located about an hour outside of Houston, a little bit over. I'm going to approach this from a different angle. I'm going to approach it from someone who's been on a number of committees that have hired faculty members in recent years. I've chaired 2 search committees, served on some other search committees, and been department chair for 2 committees, 2 more searches, including one that we just wrapped up about a month ago. So we did one during the COVID-19 pandemic. So I can speak a little bit about how we're doing them these days as well. So I'm not going to walk through sort of the standard sort of process about how to get an academic job, but instead provide some insights and observations from my involvement in multiple searches. First, I'd say what's important is have a succinct research elevator pitch. I know this is sort of common knowledge, but it's a lot of folks come in and don't do a good job at this. And this raises an immediate red flag. Be able to talk about your research in 3 to 4 minutes succinctly, and keep in mind that many of the folks listening to it aren't going to be sociologists or folks who specialize in ag and food, but they're going to be in other areas. So it can't be so specialized that it doesn't appeal to the department or the larger faculty, especially if it's multidisciplinary. So keep that in mind in terms of your elevator pitch. Second, and this will vary depending on the kind of university you're applying to, but for universities like Sam Houston and comprehensive regional universities, something that can set you apart is your teaching. Most candidates give good research talks, but there's much more variation in teaching demonstrations. Some folks come in and do a terrific job and nail it, and other folks really struggle. And so what I found at our university, other things being relatively equal, teaching is a difference maker. Teaching is what can get some folks a job or not get you the job when it comes down to sort of the final criteria. So it's important to have teaching experience when you go on the job market. Some universities are much better at this than others these days. So it's important to find ways. A lot of programs are now offering teaching classes at the grad level. I'd encourage you to take these if that's being offered. Teaching demonstrations. We require everyone to do a teaching demonstration. So you get put in a class and you got to teach for 30 or 40 minutes. What's really important here is not so much how you do, but that you show potential as a teacher. So it's okay if things fall flat. We recognize it's not your students. You don't have the same connection. It's an awkward situation. But what we're looking at is your potential in terms of teaching. So it's pretty important to sort of try to engage the students to do some active learning exercises and show what you can do and how you would teach the class, even if some of those things don't work out the way that you would anticipate. And then another part of teaching is be prepared to talk about your teaching specifically. Most folks say they use active learning, but be able to give specific examples of exercises and how you would do it in various kinds of classes. So just don't talk about it generally, talk about things you actually do or would do, and have some particular kinds of exercises or assignments lined up and be able to talk specifically about them. Another observation, in many departments, at least in sociology, but I think in other social sciences, food and ag is somewhat peripheral. For example, we cannot offer that many food and ag courses a semester or a year. So if that's coming in and is your area of specialization, you'll teach there sometimes, but you're going to have to teach in other areas. So I think as you're preparing, it's important to be strategic about sort of the areas you can or are willing to teach. I'd encourage people to sort of be willing to teach in core areas, methods, statistics, qualitative methods, theory, these core areas that departments have to offer every semester multiple sections of. Being prepared to be able to teach this will make you more attractive and be able to fit you into the curriculum in more ways. So I think important to think about. Also inequality courses. We offer a lot of inequality courses. Being able to teach social inequality is important. And then a last thing, at schools like Sam Houston, if you're doing the interview, whether it's sort of the preliminary interview by Zoom or once you get in, it's pretty important to sort of have a sense of the student body, to ask questions about the students, to show sort of the ability to engage in students. For example, we're over 50% first generation. So coming in and knowing that and being able to sort of ask questions about what it's like to teach at this kind of university, what are student experiences, is an important part of the interview. So I think I'll stop here. I think it'll be more productive to ask me questions about it, particular questions about the process and or what it's like to teach and work at a comprehensive regional university compared to Research One or the BARTs.
So let me see if folks have direct questions first, and then we'll just move it off to all four of us. So let's see here. Here's one from Nesma at the very bottom. Two of them.
Increase your chances of international academic position. I don't know. Other folks could weigh in. I think, right, we consider international folks the same as we consider folks domestic PhDs. Whether or not it would be important to do a postdoc or get some experience in the US, I don't know. Some other folks can think about it. And there are top 3 things we look for in a teaching statement. Student engagement, how you're going to engage in students, I think is important. Talk about it in specific ways, give examples connected to particular classes that you might teach. Also teaching experience, talk about what you've taught. Increasingly important is being able to teach online. Even if you haven't taught online, talk about and think about, describe how you would teach online.
There was one up here. Okay, for qualitative researchers seeking jobs in the non-academic world, any suggestions on how to increase marketability? This is a great question. I think it's a hard one. I can start, and then maybe Katie and Vanessa. I'm not in the non-academic world. There are some that you will see, but I do think that the truth is, even if you don't have quantitative skills, I think it's really important to be able to speak to how your work influences and works with quantitative skills, because you will be working with a lot of folks who are more quantitative. And so for me personally, I'm still, mostly a qualitative social scientist, but I have gotten, especially through my postdoc and other sorts of experiences, I've become really skilled at working with people who are quantitative social scientists, and also showing how my work really works well and complements their work. So that's very important. I'm gonna let other folks speak to that as well, Katie and Vanessa.
Okay. What I can share is definitely targeting yourself to organizations that do research. Like my organization does a lot of research. It's impressive how much research we do. And none of us has the researcher in general title, but we all contribute to that research. And for really hefty teams, right now we're prepping to do a national survey for 10,000 respondents, we had to consult. So leveraging yourself as a person who can, hey, I'm applying for this job, but I also have a lot of qualitative research experience that could be an asset for when you do X, Y, and Z. It's also something that you can say it will be an asset for the whole team. So definitely targeting yourself to organizations that really do research. And especially in policy and advocacy, we're always collecting research. For example, last year with COVID, there were specific grant programs that we had to do our own independent research because USDA was not doing research. And we needed that data to do advocacy to USDA to change the program. So things like that, strategies you can be I can do research and I can tell you in 2 pages the finding for you to tell USDA or any federal agency. So thinking about, again, that transferability of skills, but also showing yourself that you can be adapted to the needs of the organization you're applying.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Vanessa said. So I'm a mixed methods researcher. I have plenty of quantitative experience, but I also have a lot of qualitative experience. And the USDA at NIFA is constantly seeking stakeholder input. That's one of our main things that we have to do. It's required by Congress that we do this. So for instance, we're working on a Farm of the Future program that's looking to establish this innovative farm with new technologies and stuff. We want to get input from people on what technologies that should focus on. And so we're going to have a web page where people can comment and write in all of these things. And I'm like, I can do a content analysis on that for you if you want, so that we can like pull out the major themes and everything. And they're like, really? Like, yeah, we can totally do that. So I think maybe, saying you have the research experience, but they don't always necessarily consider that research. And so just being able to say, like Vanessa said, that those skills are transferable in all these other ways to collecting information, I think is really valuable. And they might not always make those connections right away. So you might have to point those connections out.
Yeah, I'm just going to piggyback on that. I put Aurora PhD, the website I spoke about in my presentation. And so what Katie and Vanessa, just to add to like what they said, it's all about transferring your skills. So you may say qualitative research, and for us that means all these things, but for them that means you have to say I can do content analysis, which a lot of people can't do, and they don't. And you have to it's just really transferring and speaking another language about your skills. And that Aurora PhD program is, at least a few of our universities I'm sure have it for free. If not, it's not a huge charge, and they teach you how to change your skill set from academic language into skills. And what's kind of nice, I think, is that a lot of positions don't always they don't care as much about your discipline outside of academia. They care about your skills. And so once you learn how to really communicate those, folks start to really value it, understand it differently. So we have another one about how to use a teaching assistant experience to make an argument for teaching competence. And that may be for Jason. I can also maybe speak to this, but he may be better at answering this than me.
I can jump in quickly. I think one way is to see if you can get some guest lectures, and then you can put them on your CV and talk about the guest lectures and the particular topics in the class you did that in. Another thing is to see if the instructor of the class or a committee member or your advisor would also do sort of observe and do a written evaluation of your teaching as a TA when you're doing some of these lectures. And that can also be included as part of your teaching portfolio.
Yeah, and that may take a little bit in regard to finding, guest teachers. It may just take a little bit of your own contacting people. If you're in a department already, saying, hey, can I do, professors are always looking for someone to do a guest lecture, because I think it saves them a little bit of time, and the students like it because they're looking at somebody new, And so maybe that's just you reaching out and saying, hey, I'm doing my dissertation on this. Would your students like to know about that? And that could be it, in regard to getting those extra experiences. So here's another one. It says, how can someone with research experience in international agricultural contexts pitch themselves to U.S.-focused ag research and policy organizations? It's probably a good one for Vanessa, but yeah.
Yeah, so I would say, I think what is happening in a lot of U.S. organizations is that we're trying to build more solidarity and understanding with international movements. And a lot of my job actually is working with the United Nations in some international engagement opportunities as relates to young farmers in the US and in the Western Hemisphere. So basically you're saying that you have experience organizing and doing research with that, and just making sure you translate those skills, or how would you apply that context. So maybe working with like socially disadvantaged farmers in the US, or working with refugee and immigrant farmers in the US, and also again, that social movement and solidarity that happens in the global south or other parts of the world. I think that can bring you an asset. And when you said that, I can think of like 2 or 3 organizations who are really specifically trying to do that, who they actually like to hire people with a lot of international experience, like the National Food and Farming Coalition. Most of their people had international experiences because they really like to build that solidarity connection, and a lot of their members actually serve in like United Nations engagement opportunities and more like these global engagement opportunities for food and agriculture.
That's great. And I would also piggyback on that and just say, people, if you can work in an international context, you can work anywhere, right? And so that's something that you can really, it's a big selling point. I can see that being a big selling point. Here's another one. It says, I'm less inclined to consider or apply for a job that specifies quantitative skills, even though I had basic understanding of data. What does quantitative work in the non-academic world entail? how does one need to be qualified? Asking for a heavy qual researcher. I don't know the answer to this as well. Maybe Katie, you could speak to it. I think it probably varies depending on the position. That would be my hunch, but yeah.
Yeah, I would say that it probably varies. I mean, my position specifically doesn't require having specific quantitative or qualitative skills. And I think it may just be the nature of USDA right now that it's rebuilding a lot and bringing a lot of people in. But honestly, they're just kind of willing to use whatever skills you have. So like, oh, you have these cool qualitative skills, quantitative skills, whatever. You get into the organization, then you figure out how you can use those. So it's less about like wanting the specific skills as opposed to using the skills that people come in with. That certainly may change in a different context or time. But since there's so few people right now, that's kind of what I'm getting. Yeah, sorry, I don't have a much better answer than that.
Yeah, I would say I've looked at a lot of these positions too, and I think they'll often say what they expect. You know, they want you to do high. If it is, let's say, a quantitative position, they'll, and you can always probably ask too. You know, sometimes though having experience with data may be enough. You know, more than enough. I would just maybe ask to clarify. So we have about 5 more minutes, and I'm not sure if other folks have more questions or comments, more specifically or broadly speaking.
Anna, there was a request for all the speakers putting together their listservs they belong. I'm fine with that. I actually have a list already because that's the only way I remember all the ones I belong. So I'm completely on board sharing that with the attendees.
Yeah, that would be great. Oh, here's a great one. And Vanessa, let's go back to that. Well, first of all, I don't know how to get everybody's email address. That's the only thing. So maybe if folks email me, I can put my email address up. I'll put my email address in the so email me and we'll figure it out. Okay, that's I think is the easiest way for me to get everybody's contact together. Let me see here. And so another question is, was there anything you wish you knew before you got started with your grad degree about the area you were working in now? That's a great question. If anybody else wants to go first, I will go last, but go ahead.
Yeah, I actually answered this one in the chat earlier, so I can just say what I said there, which is that I wish I had known more about the USDA, honestly. Just kind of what the different agencies are and what they do. The structure, for instance, of NIFA, what I didn't realize is there's 4 different institutes. So I'm in the Institute of Food Production and Sustainability, and within that, there's 4 different divisions. So I'm in agricultural systems, but there's also animal systems and plant production, and we all run different programs, different grant programs. So like my division is in charge of the rural community programs within AFRI. And so just understanding that structure is super helpful. And then understanding like the grant application and review process. I really wish I would have known, both for the fact that I got a NIFA job, that would have been good to know, but in academics, it's good to know that process as well. So that information can be kind of hard to find, but if you just dig into USDA NIFA's website, spend a few hours clicking around there, I think that's super, super helpful.
I guess I can jump in. So I think that for me, I think so I'm an interdisciplinary social scientist. I think I would have worked, sort of like what Jason said, just like, because you're a little bit, those of us who are more interdisciplinary. Oh, sorry, Jason. I don't know how to do that now since I all these. Okay, but I was going to say I'll unmute you after I do this. Yeah, I can do that. So what I was going to say is that maybe finding, getting better at having my research pitch, because I'm a little bit of an odd bird being an interdisciplinary social scientist, and so really tying my work to disciplines. I also think that knowing what I know now, I would have not, I was really, like others folks have said, really intent on getting an academic position, and now I'm just more open. but it took me a little while to get there. Everybody has their own process, but I would definitely have been more open from the start, but it's okay. I've still learned so much that I don't regret anything. I just think maybe that would have been something I would have rethought a little bit, and probably gained a little bit more quantitative skills, even though I have those now, maybe gotten those a little bit earlier. So Jason, I'll unmute you now. There you go. Does that work? Okay, go ahead.
We're good. I mean, the only thing I would add to that is the transition, I think, from grad school to a faculty position is more so than lots of folks recognize or are prepared for, in the sense of new responsibilities and new time commitments, whether it's managing students, doing email service. Is a whole nother set of priorities and responsibilities that come in that first semester, first year, that takes some adjusting, that we're not quite prepared for in some ways.
We have one more, and I'm not sure how to answer this. Maybe two more. There's two more. So I don't know. Do you guys have a little bit of extra time? The panelists, I think we planned for like an hour and a half. So it's officially over. If folks want to, I gave us a little bit of extra time because I knew this would happen. So feel free to stay, folks who are here, or go, whatever you'd like to do. We're going to have a couple more, like 10 more minutes or so for questions. I'm going to just kind of like the content in the first paragraph of a cover letter. I mean, maybe some folks can, I would just say as like an introduction to your work quickly, and who you are, your background, and the three things that you're best at, and in relationship to the job that you're applying to. That's what I would say would be. And if anybody has any maybe other things, they can probably just put that answer within the chat. But I'm going to go to the next question. Would you confirm for all the job market is tough generally, right? Higher education is turning out a lot of people with PhDs who would not get academic positions for many reasons. The number of tenure track nationally is declining. I mean, yeah, that's true.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I mean, that's very true. I mean, I think that's something that, and I say that when I said that, and that's just is what it is. I think that's just something that's why I think being open and flexible is really important right now. Doesn't mean it won't happen. It just means that being very flexible and open is very important. I think it's more like our generation to be like that anyway. So maybe we're better at it. Go ahead, Katie.
I mean, that was completely my experience. I threw a lot of energy into research, being on big research teams, big grants. I have over 20 publications, and I have people that I'm postdocing for. They're like, I don't know why you don't have an academic job yet. And there's been a couple that I was, the second or third choice for, and it was just a hair's width, and it wasn't me. And so it's very, very difficult. And I did so much research, and that makes me look really good, but I barely did any teaching. And then they're like, well, you don't have any teaching. I'm like, yes, but I have over 20 publications. Come on. So it can be extremely frustrating and extremely difficult. And I think it's important to acknowledge that a lot of us struggle with this. And it doesn't mean that you're not qualified. It doesn't mean that you wouldn't be good for the position. But so many times it comes down to like these very fine lines of who ends up getting hired. And sometimes that's just not you. And so one of the things that the questions that we were given at the beginning of this is looking back, knowing what you know now, what would you tell your past job market self? And I would honestly just tell myself that like not getting a tenure track position is not failure. Because that's something that was really stuck in my brain of like, I'm going to be the perfect graduate student, the perfect postdoc, get this great tenure track job at a Research One university, and like be top of my class. And that isn't how it's worked out. And you know what? I'm happy. And I may be even happier than if that had worked out. And so I would counsel myself to be less like just stringent about this is the only way that you can be successful and happy. It's really not. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what I would add to that, especially what Katie said, it's not like the goal may change, but like even the opportunity to go through the process is helpful. Like I'm really thankful for everyone that rejected me. They still gave me a call and told me why I didn't get a job, or if they didn't offer that I asked them for. That's just as a practice that I do for fellowship applications. For anything that I get rejected, I always ask for feedback, because there's still an opportunity to learn through the process. And obviously it's really frustrating and it's really scarce right now, but at least you're gonna get something out of it. Either practice your interview skills, practice your elevator pitch, or just practice getting feedback on who you are and how you're presenting yourself. And that's something I try to do right now, being in the other end, like being in hiring panels. I always offer to give people feedback if they didn't ask for it. Like, hey, can I talk to you for 15 minutes about things you did wrong in your interview that I wish you had told me better? So just trying to streamline everything so we can, replicating those opportunities for more people.
Yeah, I second that. If I'd reach out, if you go through an interview and don't get the job, I'd reach out to a committee member, the chair of the search committee, and just informally ask for some feedback. And 99% of the time, they'll be constructive and helpful and give you feedback, I would say.
Yeah, I would, no matter what kind of position that you're applying for, and no matter like if you're master's, undergrad, PhD, just like they say, I've just started doing that. At first I was mortified because I was like, oh my gosh, it's going to be awful. But then, they give the best feedback, and usually it make your fears that you had kind of go away. Like you were second, or you 99.9% of the time, no matter what scale, or you were definitely qualified. It's just you weren't the right fit. And that's what makes it true, and yeah, like what Katie and Vanessa said, and what Jason said, I mean, it's just like, it's totally not you. It's just the academic, just remembering that the whole time. It's just this academic system that we're in, or if you're not going for an academic job, we're in a pandemic, we're in a hard economy. It's not you. It's just that it's out there, and it's difficult to get a position, right? It's just a hard time right now. And that's why we have so many people in this wonderful webinar, I think, because it's not you, it's the times that we're in. So, yeah. So I guess we have, anybody. So I think, one more question about academic out for academic interviews. And then I think after that, we don't have any more questions. Feel free to contact me. Other people are putting their email address within. Our website is afhfas.wildapricot.org, and you can our listserv, our beginning researchers, graduate student emerging scholars listserv. We send out job posts as well as other webinar things. And so real fast, any advice for fly out academic interviews after the pandemic? That's a good question. And then we'll just end with that, unless, yeah.
I can quickly start. I mean, I think be prepared. It's a long process. It can really wear you down. It's 2 or 3 days typically, tons of meetings, right? So be prepared. Try to drink water and stay on top of things. And I don't know.
Yes, I've been to a few, and I haven't, I mean, I'm sure a couple of others have as well. Yeah, drink water, be prepared, sleep.
So, yeah.
All those things if you can. Vanessa, what was your job interview process like? Was it just, was it more, was remote? And was it 1 interview or 2 interviews?
3 interviews.
3 interviews, okay. Mm-hmm. And was it an all-day experience, or were they each like an hour a piece or something?
Like an hour usually.
Okay, great.
Something really weird happened. Like one of the jobs I was applying, all of them were in person. And then the final one that was actually with the top director, I was away because I had to go to a conference in DC. And that was a little awkward. It's like, hi, I was not interviewing for another job, but I was just like meeting, and it was like, hi, sorry I couldn't be there, but I had this prior commitment. And at the end that worked out because like the people that I met at that conference are people that I work with now, but I didn't get the other job. So trade-offs.
That's funny. And Katie, real fast, what was your interview experience like with the USDA? Was it 1 or was it 2, 3?
It was 1 interview. I think it was like an hour of like just me doing presentations and them asking questions, and then an hour of just like informal kind of talk with the rest of the department. I did it remotely because it was COVID, from my in-laws' spare bedroom with like dogs barking in the background and stuff. But yeah, it wasn't terribly long, really.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and postdocs in visiting positions are usually one interview on Zoom, so they're not going to be as intensive. Okay, great. Thank you all, everybody. We all have our contact information. Thank you, everybody in the audience, for coming. Yeah, take care. I guess that's about it. So thank you, Vanessa and Katie and Jason, so much for your time and expertise and information. So
thank you so much, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, Anna, for putting everything together.
Oh, you're welcome.